Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 969B, and today's date is May 12th, 2016, and the title of the episode is Militarization of Police Has Accelerated for the Upcoming Civil Disobedience. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. On the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel, I uploaded an interview with Andy Hoffman. So if you go over to X22 Report Spotlight on YouTube, you'll see the video there. Or you can come over to the x22report.com site, scroll down a little bit, you'll see the interview on the right-hand side. Or you can go to newssentinel.com. Same thing, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side, and you can play the video there. Let's get right into the economic collapse financial news. Now, we've talked about the FBI and how they want backdoors into encryption. And everyone thought, oh, you know what? It's all over with. The FBI got into that Apple phone. They found a way to break in. So the fight is over. Everything can go back to normal. Everyone can use encryption. And the FBI doesn't care. Well, not so. The FBI Director, James Comey, now he's saying that encryption is the essential tradecraft of terrorist groups. And he wants full access to every encrypted device. He even went as far as saying that the WhatsApp end-to-end encryption is affecting the criminal work of the FBI. So now he's attacking any app or any email system that they cannot access because they want a backdoor to spy on every single person. And one of the statements he made was, encryption is an essential tradecraft of terrorist groups such as the Islamic State. The number of Americans trying to join the Islamic State has dropped to 1 per month since August of 2015, compared to between 6 and 10 per month in previous 18 months. I think the Islamic State brand has lost significant power in the United States. So terrorism is going down. People aren't going over to the Islamic State. Now we know all that's completely fake, phony, and false. We know these were all patsies. We know the Islamic State is the proxy arm of the United States government central bankers, and we know that they're using them to push their agenda. But it's very interesting how he says it's down to 1 per month. That's 12 a year. I mean, think about the numbers here. It's absolutely ridiculous. And we should just give up our rights because of what he's saying. And this is why everyone needs to reaffirm their rights. They need to say, you know something? I'm going to use WhatsApp. I'm going to use encrypted email systems. I'm going to encrypt my data on my hard drive. Everywhere I go, I'm going to use encryption to make it difficult for the government. I'm going to use products like blockitpocket.com. I'm going to slip my phone into the sleeve. It will block the signal. So wherever I walk and wherever I go, they can't track me. I'm going to put my credit cards in there so I can't be tracked. The real ID with the RFID chip, I'm going to put it in the blockitpocket.com sleeve so nobody can track me. Whatever we do at this point, it should be the opposite of what the government is telling us. If they're telling us to get rid of encryption, we load up on encryption. If they're telling us not to keep things in our safe, we put things in a safe. If they tell us you're allowed to be searched, we resist being searched. We have rights. Now, what's very interesting is that back in 2014 of October, Obama began planning to increase funding for military equipment transfers to the police. But in May of 2015, he flip-flopped because people were saying, whoa, why do the local police need armored vehicles, machine guns, and all this equipment? So he said, okay, we're going to demilitarize the police. Well, this was a lie, everyone. He didn't follow through. Anyone surprised about this? No. Now, he made a pledge to demilitarize the police. And when we look at the new federal data, it shows that in 2014 and 2015, they were peak years for shipments of surplus military gear to local police departments across America. Now, despite the outcry, the public outcry to Obama, he did the opposite and actually accelerated the process. So what we're seeing is that the militarization of local police departments increased, and they transferred about 1.5 million weapons-related items from the Department of Defense to federal, state, local law enforcement. New federal records show police agencies in Florida, Texas, California, Tennessee, Arizona led the nation in procuring surplus military weaponry. Small-town police are armed with M16 and M14 rifles, night vision goggles, bayonets, and armored trucks. Junior colleges and county sheriffs, they have mine-resistant vehicles. Even local park districts and forest preserves stock up on military-style equipment. Now, in total, the new data reveals about $2.2 billion worth of military gear, including helicopters and airplanes, armored trucks, cars, tens of thousands of these M16s, M14 rifles, and the thousands of bayonets, mine detectors, and many other type of weaponry were all delivered. Now, the question is, we hear all these different types of weaponry, but bayonets? I mean, isn't this a little extreme at this point? Because think about it. A bayonet is used for hand-in-hand combat and is tactically used to bleed out your enemies. So why does local law enforcement or DHS or ATF or FBI, DAA, why do they need military bayonets? So from the data, it shows that 5,638 bayonets, they were sent to federal law enforcement agencies or local police departments. DHS obtained about almost 4,000 bayonets at 15 locations. This should scare everyone at this point. What is the purpose of all of this? They're that afraid of the American people. Why would the federal agencies, the local law enforcement, need all of this? Because when this economy collapses, there's going to be civil disobedience. People are going to be scared. They're going to be afraid. There's going to be riots. There are going to be situations where you're not going to be able to leave the house because it's too scary out there. You might even hear gunshots going off multiple times in your neighborhood. What's very interesting, people say, oh, that can't be true. That would never happen. This is America. Well, remember Hurricane Sandy? Well, I had my brother-in-law and I told you this story. There was blackouts all in the area there. And at night, most of the people left their houses. They went to other locations. He decided to stay in his house, which is right on the Long Island Sound. And at night, he would hear windows breaking. He heard pops. He doesn't know if they were gunshots or other things. And he heard people roaming the streets. And he doesn't own a weapon, so he had a bat. Lights were out. It was very dark. But people were looting. When we are in these situations, people get scared. They get nervous. They feel they don't have the supplies they need. They don't know how they're going to survive. Their world has turned upside down. And I know we're all going to feel it. I know we like to talk about it, and we say, well, I'm going to do this. You don't know what you're going to do until you're in the situation. You don't know what you're going to feel like until the situation occurs. When the electric goes out. When you hear on the news that the economy has collapsed. The banks have frozen all accounts. When you hear there are raids on supermarkets. This is what the government is getting prepared for. Not to protect you, but to protect them. Well, it looks like the U.S. government central bankers, they are getting their way in Brazil. It looks like there was a vote in Brazil, and the Senate concluded, after a marathon of about 21-hour session, that President Rousseff will face impeachment trial. She is suspended. Now, what's very interesting about all of this is that 60% of the legislators accusing her of corruption and judging her, in fact, have procedures running against them for corruption. And this is coming from Dr. Kai Michael Kenkel, professor in the Institute of International Relations at the University of Rio de Janeiro. So the system is corrupt, and we have corrupt people pushing this agenda on the president. And of course, as we know, the U.S. government, they like dealing with the corrupt people, and they got 60% of them, and they were able to use that to push this ruling. Now, she said she's going to fight it, and we'll have to wait to see how this turns out. Now, is this going to improve Brazil? Is going to improve their economy? No, this is not. Just look at the other countries that the U.S. tried to have a regime change or were successful in having a regime change. Their economies are a disaster. The country's a disaster. Most of the countries are in the middle of a civil war. And we can see right now this is going to happen in Brazil, and the situation down there is going to get much, much worse. Now, there was a survey done by International Politik, and the survey shows that 70% of Germans oppose keeping the entire bulk of EU sanctions on Russia in place. We see France at this point wants to remove them. Germany wants to remove them. Most of the European nations don't want to go along with it. It is hurting their economy. The only country that it's benefiting is the United States. And they're hurting the European economies to get to Russia. And is it really hurting Russia at this point? Not really. Now, out in Turkey, President Erdogan, he's called on NATO to bolster its presence in the Black Sea, which he claims has turned into a Russian lake, which means that Russia controls the Black Sea, and NATO needs to get in there. And if NATO doesn't go into the Black Sea, he says that history will not forgive us. And you can see right now that Russia is not taking its military forces, its ships, and positioning them on the border of the United States via Mexico or Canada, or placing it all around Europe. It's NATO and the United States that's doing this. They're the aggressor at this point. Russia is within its borders. NATO, the United States, Turkey, they're moving closer to the border of Russia. Why? Because they need to provoke a war. That's the entire push. Now, we see that NATO, they've placed a missile system in Romania. Of course, they're saying this is nothing to do with Russia. The system is directed against threats coming from outside the Euro-Atlantic space. Well, who is this outside the Euro-Atlantic space? What country? Where are they talking about? No, it's against Russia. The sites in Romania and Poland can be converted into systems that can fire Tomahawk missiles. They are the Aegis Ashore and is derived from a naval anti-ballistic missile system. The Standard Missile 3 interceptors are launched by a variant of Mk-41 VLS. The same vertical launch system is used by the U.S. Navy to launch Tomahawk cruise missiles. The U.S. banned from deploying Tomahawk missiles in Europe by the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which Moscow and Washington signed in 1987. So these missile systems can be converted to fire Tomahawk missiles. And this is what Russia is nervous about. Plus, to fire these interceptors at ballistic missiles, because they're saying it's an offensive system, they need to put powerful radar stations there. So now they have powerful radar stations right at the border of Russia. Can you imagine if Russia made a deal with Canada and Mexico and put powerful radar stations along the border of the North and the South? Would the U.S. feel okay about this? Absolutely not. Saudi Arabia right now, they are threatening to occupy Yemen capital if the Houthis don't bow to their demands. during the peace talks. Now, of course, Saudi Arabia, they're having a very tough time trying to get anywhere in Yemen. And it seems that this is a lot of hot air, and it looks like they're threatening the Houthis. But we'll have to wait and see. They're in the middle of a ceasefire talk right now, and we'll have to see how this goes, because Saudi Arabia has gotten nowhere in Yemen at this point. Now, out in Iraq, the U.S. is still trying to convince the Iraqi people that we don't support the Islamic State. We're fighting against them. But, of course, there's a lot of evidence showing the opposite, which is occurring. Now, there was supposed to be a huge offensive against the Islamic State in Mosul. And we see that it is delayed once again, because the U.S. is saying, we have problems here, everything's not ready, we're not very optimistic about this, and it looks like they're stalling. And of course, they're blaming it on the Iraqi armed forces. Now, if you remember, when the United States was removed and the Iraqi forces were on their own, they were able to free up certain areas from the Islamic State. And the Iraqi forces continually blame the U.S. soldiers for getting in their way. Now, Italy, they are sending about 500 Italian ground troops into Iraq, and they're going to guard the Mosul dam. Now, we have to remember that an Italian contractor, Trevi Group, they've signed a $269 million deal with the Iraqi government to fix up the Mosul dam. Now, there's a lot of reports out there saying that the Islamic State might try to blow it up, and it might flood millions and millions of people. I think this is what they're looking to do if they can't keep the Islamic State in this area. And this is why they're trying to continually mess up the Iraqi forces. Now, we see the truce has ended in Syria. We see the fighting has continued. And the militants right now, they are continually shelling the residents in Aleppo. And just recently, we had a meeting of the U.S. and the coalition forces, the 15 countries, and the countries that were in the UN Security Council were the United Kingdom, United States, France, Ukraine, and they blocked the Russian draft resolution because Russia wanted to take these two groups, Ahrar al-Sham and Jaish al-Islam, and they wanted to make them terrorist organizations because they're saying that these two groups are aligned with Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra, and they consider them terrorists. And the U.S. said absolutely not, and it was blocked because they use these groups in the fight. Now, are they part of the Free Syrian Army? No. But we can see that the U.S. time and time again uses these terrorist groups because they're part of the entire proxy army system. And they move people back and forth. They morph them into the next group where they need them. And whatever Russia wants to do, they're going to block it because their goal is not to go after the terrorists. Their goal is to go after Assad. This is why they're not helping them in Palmyra to defend Palmyra. This is why they didn't help them with the offensive in Palmyra. Russia and the United States are on either side. Basically, you can say World War III has started, but they're using proxy forces at this point. Now, we also see the U.S., Britain, France also blocked the passage for a Russian draft Security Council resolution to ban developing, obtaining, possessing, transporting, transferring, or using chemical weapons and their means of delivery in Syria. Now, why would they block this? I thought the U.S. was against chemical weapons. Well, we know that the U.S., they want the proxy armies to use these type of weapons. It helps them against the civilians. It helps them to blame it on Assad. And we're getting reports that there are trucks loaded with chemical warfare munitions spotted in the north of Aleppo, and they're going to the terrorist groups that the U.S. supports. Because we realize that it's not Assad who's using these chemical weapons. Russia has proved it. Assad has proved it. And the U.S., they've been caught with their proxy army using sarin gas, having chlorine gas, and they are being supplied all these weapons from Turkey, from Israel, from the coalition forces. Now, local residents there, they have seen truckloads with improvised explosive devices, and they are stuffed with chlorine-based poisonous chemicals. And they're being delivered to al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, and all the other terrorist groups. And all they have to say, and the U.S. likes to do this, oh, it's the terrorists. They're the ones who are using it, not us. And that's what they said when they got caught. But again, the U.S. is supporting all of these groups. They're supplying them with weapons. They're paying for them. Now, Turkey, they are gearing up to go into Syria. Now, of course, the propaganda is that they're going after the Islamic State because they're saying that the southern town of Kili was under rocket fire from Syria, from the Islamic State, and they're taking it upon themselves to bring in ground troops into Syria to wipe them out. Well, that's not what they're really going to do. They're getting ready and prepared to establish a safe zone. And we're going to have to watch this situation very, very carefully. And we see at this point that the ceasefire is off. The battle has begun in Aleppo. And right now, the U.S. continually breaks its promises to Russia. Remember back when the ceasefire was first being established? U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, he made the promise to separate the groups as part of the understanding underlying the ceasefire, the UN resolution. Russia's been waiting, they've been asking for it. And basically what Kerry said is, you know what? We're not doing it. Obama said, we're not doing it. And they never followed through. You know why? Because the Free Syrian Army really doesn't exist. It's really the terrorist groups. And they say, oh yeah, these three people over here, they're the Free Syrian Army. And if they separate them, it would show that all these terrorist groups have been working for the United States, and there really is no Free Syrian Army. And this is why they never got around doing it. This is why they broke their promise. Because their main mission now is, I don't even think to get Assad anymore. I think they're going to push for World War III, period. They want the battle started, and they're going to make a huge push coming into this August. And the reason why I say August is, if we go back in time, 2013, Congress leaves for vacation. Obama has the run of the White House. We saw the sarin gas attack happen in this time frame. We saw the elections occur in June, going into July. Then we saw the Islamic State appear in August. 2015, the U.S. decided to bomb inside Syria in August. And they've been stalling, waiting, preparing for this August. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.